our final keynote of the day, which is Mika Nishimura. Mika is a global commercialization leader, independent director, and venture investor operational partner at Gilde Healthcare, whose team is focused on health tech and therapeutics in Europe and North America. With nearly 30 years of leadership experience in the medical device industry and as a global commercialization executive, Mika is known for conceiving, planning, and launching disruptive medical technologies across global markets from inception to scale, consistently exceeding corporate objectives and financial goals. As a trusted advisor to C-level management and board directors looking to grow international business, she's perceived as a versatile executive who successfully shepherds organizations from small, early clinical stage private ventures to global commercial enterprises across a spectrum of technologies. Mika also serves as a board member for SI-BONE Inc., Accuray Inc., and as a board advisor to Tristel, a UK public medical device company. From 2016 to 2020, she served as vice president of commercialization at Envision Medical Corporation, an early stage medical device company acquired by Boston Scientific. Previously, she served as vice president, commercial development at Oxygen, a medical technology company acquired by Progeny. Early in her career, Ms. Nishimura served as vice president of international sales and operations at EV3 Inc., where she held P&L responsibility for emerging markets. One of my colleagues who introduced me to Mika worked alongside her at Guidance some 30 years ago and intermittently ever since. She had this to say: Mika is one of the smartest and most caring people and is the best networker I've ever met. She simply loves interacting with all sorts of people and is sincerely curious about them. She herself is the epitome of international cultural diversity, having been raised in both Japan and the US and choosing to marry an Australian. She has successfully worked seamlessly across multiple other cultures since much of her career involved international sales and marketing. She's made an impact on some of the most important medtech companies, large and small, over the last 30 years, like the ones I previously mentioned, and seeing them through to acquisition. Who better to hear about charting your career than this long-term industry expert? And now I'll turn it over to Mika.
Oh, thank you, Ingrid. And thank you, Marga, for those kind words and connecting me to this program. I have to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed my first session so far with the keynote speakers, and also meeting a couple of you along the way. So I'm going to share my screen in the interest of getting going. Can everybody see my slide?
Yes.
Thumbs up? Okay, great. All right. So I've been asked to give this talk about charting your career. And along my career, a lot of people have said, wow, Mika, you've had an amazing career. You know, how did you do this? You know, you started with brand name consulting companies like Bain and LEK, and then you joined Guidance, you know, that storied company in our industry, especially in the Bay Area. You know, you got promoted along the way, and then did the same thing at EV3. But then you pivoted to working with a couple early stage companies and had successful exits. And now you're venture partner with a transatlantic venture fund that's doing great. And wow, you know, you joined public company boards. So it looks like I had this amazing strategic roadmap for the 3 decades of my medtech career, all planned out, and I flawlessly executed it, right? But the reality was nothing like that. So this is kind of really what it looked like. So I'm kind of like, you know, trudging along in the 90s, my first several years in the medtech career, I, you know, like Ingrid said, married to an Aussie who also was at a big company, and he was trudging along his career. And then the first road bump that we hit was we were both being told by our bosses that, well, in order for you to move up in this organization, you will have to be willing to pick up every 18 to 24 months, move to a different location, and, you know, assume new responsibilities. And that could be within the US, that could be international. So we had what we call a couple of fake head fake moves, where For example, my husband proposed to me one February day when it was 72 degrees in Santa Clara, and I'm enjoying lunch at a Guiding Cafe, sitting with my colleagues. You know, it's beautiful, we're just sunning ourselves. And he's calling from Minneapolis saying like, I've been offered this terrific promotion. And, you know, I'd like you to think about moving to Minneapolis. Now, that particular day, in northern Minnesota, it hit record low temperatures ever recorded south of the Canadian border. So it was minus 56 degrees. There were people from network TVs descending upon this place, you know, to just show how cold it is. And I'm thinking, okay, if there's more than 120-degree temperature swing, not gonna happen. So that was head fake move number one. Head fake number two came along a couple years later. He was offered an opportunity to move to Europe, to be in Zurich, Switzerland. And then he sat down and calculated that, well, you know, Mika talked to her bosses, nothing sort of immediately available in Guided Europe. So if she's on the beach and she's 90 minutes away from Milan, where her favorite brand name shops are, this is not going to work economically. So we didn't move to Switzerland. But the third move actually didn't, well, kind of sort of was a head fake move. So he was then offered a new job with a new company to move to Texas, Austin, Texas. So I had conversations with my mentors at Guidant. What can I do? You know, at Guidant, there wasn't anything in Texas unless I was willing to commute 3 hours to Houston. So that was not going to happen. And at that point, we had a young child, a 1-year-old. So I decided, you know what? This is probably not a bad time for me to take a pause, leave Guidant, move to Texas, you know, see what the next few years might be. So I did that. I cashed out my options. They threw me a big party, going away party. We put our house on the market in the Bay Area. We're looking to buy a house in Texas. And then my dear husband turns around to me 3 months later and says, we probably should have moved to Austin, Texas. And I kind of blew up at that point. But so it gave me an opportunity to try being a full-time mom. And I was miserable at it. I crawl up the wall. A lot of women are and men, you know, are great at doing the full-time parent thing. I was not one of those. So that led me to actually start a Reevaluate. So then what do I want to do? Because I want to have a professional life. So what could that look like that's compatible with how I want to live my personal life? That led me to being advisor to a number of startups, you know, that Guidant people started, you know, in the Bay Area. So I ended up advising a number of companies. A couple of them asked me to join them as full-time execs. So I did that, which then, you know, and that seems so great, right? You know, you hear about all these wonderful exits, you know, that companies have had in their area. But, you know, it wasn't always rosy. It wasn't always easy. You know, there were a lot of startup challenges, you know, with funding, of course, with dysfunctional boards, you know, management turnover, you know, having to pivot from one thing to another. You're not really sure where this is going to go. And so there were a lot of trials and tribulations. I'll talk a little bit about that later. But in the end, it kind of worked out. So the last company got acquired. And then the last hiccup, you know, that's hitting me right now is my husband decides to retire. I'm like, what? So that's yet to kind of be worked out, you know, so you know, maybe next year I can tell you, you know, how that's going. But yeah, so my point is, you know, it's never predictable. It's never a straight, you know, course. So you have to constantly think about, all right, so how do I pivot? How do I reevaluate? How do you want to stick with the course or do you need to change course? So let's kind of talk about some of the lessons that I learned along the way. So lessons learned. For those people who are really young and just starting your career, if you're not sure if you want to go to a small company or big company, when in doubt, start big. Okay? Regardless of where you are, cultivate mentors and advocates for you. Network, network, network. Network is not a dirty word. I'll tell you, the benefits of networking, and the fact that you're doing this, is a great start. The 7-year itch, or in my case, it was a 4-year itch. Every 4 years, something would happen that would make me reevaluate my course. And it's a great time to reset, reevaluate, and think how you want to potentially adjust, what you want to do. You don't need to check all the boxes. We all have a tendency to look at a job description and say, well, I have 80% of that, but I don't check the last 20%, and don't take that step. So let's kind of talk about overcoming that tendency. And the last is enjoy the journey. It really is a journey. It's not just a fast, straight line to a destination. And you'll have wonderful things happen on the way. So take a moment, enjoy it, and just don't think of it, as this arduous trip that you need to make. So first, when in doubt, start big. Why do I say that? It's because bigger companies, for people who are starting out, can offer a lot more training and potentially opportunities to try out different functional areas more so than startup companies. So startup companies, because they're cash strapped and they can't hire a whole bunch of people, want you to be able to jump right in and contribute because you've been there, done that numerous times, and you can do it in the sleep. Whereas the bigger companies, are used to hiring new people who may need a lot more training and hand-holding, and they have programs and resources to do that. So, so the training aspect is wonderful. They also tend to have more willingness to move people around within the organization, which again, could be good or bad. But if you want to try, if you're an engineer and you try out marketing, great, wonderful. Yeah, we can make you, a project manager, a product manager. If you want, you're a marketing person and you want to go into BD, great. Yeah, we can make that happen. So, it's a great way if you're not sure that you want to forever be in the technical area or in the marketing or in clinical, that it's a great way to try out different functional areas. You also have a bigger network of people that may come in handy later in your career. So when in doubt, start big. Cultivate mentors and advocates. I've been very, very fortunate for those of us, who grew up in organizations that really do have senior people who are willing to devote their time and be your mentors and advocate. In my case at Guidant, I was a lonely manager at the time. Ginger Graham was really dedicated to making sure that women and minorities, will continue to get exposure throughout the organization. So I would just go over to her admin's desk, schedule a time, have coffee, have lunch, go for a walk together every 6 months or so. It wasn't just Ginger. I had wonderful mentors and advocates that even today, they're the people that I turn to when I need advice or when I'm thinking about something new and want to try out, it's like, how does it sound to you? They're the sounding boards. So it can be a lifelong relationship. So by all means, go out and do that. Which also leads to network. A lot of people think network is very transactional, that, okay, I do this for you and you do this for me. That may kind of work out in the long term, but that's not really the intention. The intention is to really get to know different people and nurture that relationship without apparent sort of immediate, tip of that type of give or take. But when I think about all the clients I've had, and I probably have had 60 clients in my advisory role over the years, all the jobs that I've gotten, starting at, post Guidant, all the board positions that I have received, they all came from network. Not a single one of them came from just a random outside, outreach. So it's a really important thing. You can network within your organization. You can network in an organization like this, a forum like this. It can be your neighbor, it can be your classmate, from school, but nurture those relationships because it does take time and effort and intention to make sure that you devote some time to do that. The 7-year or the 4-year itch, in my case, it seemed like every 4 years, I would kind of have a little bit of a voice saying, I'm bored in my current job. And I'm no longer learning, I'm no longer growing, or that, the job is satisfactory, but I'm not getting the personal side taken care of. So continue to reassess and reevaluate. It's not, I was having this conversation in my previous mentoring session, like, well, I don't have a 5-year or 10-year goal. That's totally fine. But just keep on evaluating every few years where you are, reflect, evaluate, kind of distill things down, and think about what your plan is going to be. And it doesn't have to be this long-term strategic plan. It can be, okay, for in the next 12 months, I want to learn this new skill, or I want to meet these sorts of new people outside of my organization. It can be as simple as that. Just, take baby steps, reestablish yourself, and, devote some time to do that. You can't really do this, when it's like, well, I'll do it during coffee break, or I'll do it over, this Sunday. Just, you need some concentrated time to do that. So make sure that you devote sufficient attention to it. You don't have to check all the boxes. So as Ingrid mentioned, I started serving on corporate boards. That was an intentional thing on my part, as my last company was acquired by Boston, and I was serving a 2-year corporate sentence at Boston. By the way, Boston is a great organization, but I knew that I didn't want to stay there post 2 years. When I started to think about what did I want to do post Boston, I became very interested in corporate boards. So I reached out to one of my friends from Oxygen Days who serves on corporate boards. And I told this person, Laura, so I'm thinking about joining corporate boards, but unlike you, I've never been a public company CFO. I've never been a CEO. So I don't think public company board is within my reach. And Laura slapped me upside down and said, why in the world are you selling yourself so short? Boards nowadays are not looking for ex-CEOs and CFOs necessarily. They're being very intentional about the type of people that they recruit to fill a specific need. So you need to position yourself in that light. And that was when I realized, like, oh my God, I'm doing this again. That I, saying that I fill 80% of the boxes, but I can't check the last 2, and I'm taking myself out of it. So don't do that. It went, a lot of people, especially guys, would raise their hand even when they only check half the boxes. So don't be shy. You can learn things along the way. And this is my last one. Enjoy the journey. So those of us living in the Bay Area know I-5, right? You can go, to Sacramento, down to, LA area, just on this straight, freeway that's boring as heck. You can do that, or you can take side roads and enjoy the scenery, come to a fork in the road, not sure where one or the other leads, and you'll have to kind of trust your gut, along with advice from a lot of people. But nothing is irrecoverable, nothing is permanent. Just because you might have taken a detour doesn't mean that you're stuck there forever. You can always backtrack, you can take side roads, and just stop and smell along the way and enjoy it, rather than just go on the I-5. Right, so that's it. I'm happy to entertain any questions.